This is Voices from the Field with Katie Lively and Jayden Mount. And today we have Ashlie Rowley with us. She is a former catcher at the University of Florida, and she is the founder and CEO of Colorado Softball Academy. So thank you for being on the call, Ashlie. We really appreciate you taking the time. So we actually received a team spotlight for you, and stay tuned for that. But we are going to kind of ask some questions based off the answers you gave us. So it looks like Colorado Softball Academy was founded in 2021. So it's still a pretty new organization. Could you tell us more about the creation of this organization? What inspired you to start it? And how do you think it's impacted the surrounding softball community?
Yeah, absolutely. First and foremost, thanks for having me on. It's an honor and pleasure to be here, and I appreciate you guys highlighting CSA as well as our kids. So the concept for Colorado Softball Academy actually began in 2019. At that time, I had two kiddos under 3, so daycare was expensive, and I was like, you know what? I'm going to get back into doing lessons. I need a little bit of a side hustle here. Daycare is expensive, all the things. When I started to do that, a few things happened. Number one, I said, all right, I'm going to take on 8 catchers. Okay. And every kid that I met, when they walked in, the first thing out of their parents' mouth was, she has no confidence. I was like, okay. Then during the fall of 2019, my niece was 12 at the time, lived in Ohio, and my sister-in-law called me and said, Ash, I need to give you a heads up that one of Presley's good friends died by suicide. And it was all because 2 boys walked up to her on the playground and said, you're fat and you're ugly and you should kill yourself. And this little girl's self-confidence was so low that she did. So for me, as a young mom of 2 little girls, myself, I looked at them and said, what kind of environment do I want them to grow up in, and who do I want them surrounded by? And so it became apparent to me throughout that fall in this process that softball is a platform for us to pour into these kids, to teach them life lessons that are going to set them up for success both on and off the field. So what I did at that rate is I reached out to some of our local BAs, if you will. I don't know if I'm allowed to say that word, but just rock star instructors, right? That have played high level college softball and are still in the game and giving lessons. And I said, ladies, we need to come together and we need to create a community under one roof where it's an environment that's dedicated to and focused on female athletes, where they not only have the mentorship of those who have played this game at the highest level, but also access to the resources, high level resources from a training perspective, right? There's a lot of facilities around, and a lot of times as a softball player, you'll walk into those facilities and it's baseball and softball, right? And it's like, hey, can I get a cage? Sure, I think there's one in the corner. Oh, do you need a bucket of balls? Let me find one, right? Everybody's lived that, right? So for me, obviously, this started as kind of a passion project for several personal reasons, but that was really kind of the crux of how this was founded. So fun fact, this concept started as a facility where I wanted a brick and mortar. I wanted a home. I wanted a place where these kids could come, an environment where we could pour into them and it was positive and it was constructive. They could train and they could have all the resources they need to train mentally, physically, and emotionally. In line with that, we started the Colorado Softball Academy Foundation, which is a 501c nonprofit. And one of the pillars for the CSA Foundation is to be able to cover the cover the cost of clinical mental health support for our athletes, right? So we're not talking about sports psychology or goal setting or failing forward. We're talking about issues with eating disorders or bullying or things that require clinical support. And so what we do with the foundation is the money we raise, essentially, if there's a coach in our organization that recognizes we have an athlete in need, I can, walk up, put my arm around him and say, hey, let's go have a conversation with my friend and I can take care of the cost of that through the foundation. That way we remove any barriers for them. So that's really how this started. So I didn't plan to have an organization of teams until we had a group of 16-year-old athletes that first year in 2021 who said, Coach Ash, where should I go try out? And at that time, I didn't love the options that I was recommending, right? So I looked at our coaches internally and I said, who wants to coach a 16s team? And one raised their hand. And so we put together a tryout and we had 88 kids show up.
Wow.
So then, 6 weeks later, I now have 8 teams for this upcoming season. And so it was hey, I'm going to put the cart before the horse a little bit. But there became such an apparent need within our community that this type of environment was necessary, that it was needed. So that's how it all began.
That's
That's
amazing.
awesome. Yeah.
I love that. That's so needed now in the world. that we live in is that mental health resource and piece to that. I love that you're focusing on the person rather than the athlete. I feel like that's a big thing we hear from athletes is, we're not seen as people, we're just seen as someone on the field. So that's amazing what you're doing. That inspires me for sure. That's amazing.
I appreciate it very much.
Yeah.
It's crazy because it's a full circle concept, right?
Yeah.
I look at the athletes that are coming out of college and I walk this walk too. The minute you hang your cleats up, who are you?
Yeah.
Because a large part of your identity has been so wrapped up in this game. And we tell athletes all the time, softball's something you do, it's not who you are.
Yeah.
But how the heck do you draw that distinction when you live it and breathe it day in and day out?
Right.
Yeah.
And you want to do well. Like
Mhm.
it's that hard line of like you want to do well and you want to practice. So it's not bad, but then it's like, yeah, where's that?
Well, and
that
it's your
line?
built-in friend group, right? And it's your
Yeah,
schedule,
right.
right? There's so many
Everything.
aspects. And so once it's gone, even the older athletes go, what am I doing? And so when we first started this, I had a handful of coaches who lost their senior year to COVID. And so
Yeah.
while they are pouring into the younger kids, I'm having to do work with them.
Mm.
Yep.
Yeah.
Yeah,
That's
that was
incredible.
tough. I actually had to live through that. My senior year was COVID in college, and it was just like, oh my gosh,
Mhm.
am I done? Like,
Yeah.
was that just my last game? I went 0 for 3, and I was like, wow, that was it.
Yeah,
But
exactly.
thankfully, I got my other year back. So kind of going into the coaching aspect, your team has leadership through former college coaches and players. Like, how does that impact the way your athletes are coached and trained?
Well, what's cool about every select and United team in our program has at least one female coach who's either played or coached softball at the collegiate level. And so what we do, we've got a good leadership team, really put together of those amazing women that raised their hand and said, I'm in, when I called them and said, hey, hold my beer, let's do something cool, right? And what we do is we put together a training curriculum, whether it's during season or it's off season, that will reflect that of high level training. We pull a lot of our experience that we really received when we were in college and or the pros, right? And then we customize that training program to the age group and the skill set of our athletes. So what's neat about that is we've got kind of an age range of our coaches on our leadership team. I'm kind of one of the dinosaurs these days. I don't like to admit it, but it's cool to see how the game has evolved and how development has evolved throughout the generations that even followed in my footsteps. And so we can bring all of that experience collectively to say, all right, what is the CSA player development program? What does our off season look like? What does our in season look like? What does our recruiting and exposure look like? And so that's really kind of how we write our player development curriculum.
Yeah, I really like that because a lot of coaches just say, hey, go put on a pair of cleats and go play ball, but you're actually like preparing them for when they go into college. So I think that's really cool.
Yeah, for sure. And so kind of going off preparing those athletes and coaching those athletes, you talk about in your spotlight that your mission is to develop the whole athlete, which is mentally, physically, and emotionally. So how do you incorporate those values into daily training and team activities in your organization?
Absolutely. So, I mean, I will raise my hand as someone who did not have all three of these boxes checked when I was a college athlete. Physically, nobody could stop me, but I was so hard on myself that my coaches didn't even need to say a word. And that was actually a detriment, right? Coach Carey will admit there's times where I was probably tough to coach because I would get so frustrated with myself.
Yeah.
Ways that we implement that with our athletes is we're huge on positive affirmations. So tying back to kind of our founding story, we preach with our athletes, once you learn how to control the thoughts in your head, you will be able to develop your own self-confidence by looking inward instead of looking to external resources for that feedback, right? Because as female athletes, we are wired to nitpick every little thing we see and we don't ever forget it. So if we see coach shrug their shoulders after we missed a bunt, or we hear one comment and the tone wasn't warm and fluffy with a heart emoji, right? We're going to hang on to that. And then we start creating stories in our heads. So what we do every day and we do in the facility is before practices and games, and we try to make this a daily habit, is I want to know what every athlete's physical goal, mental goal, and I am statement is. And we will go around in a circle and I will ask them these questions because what that forces them to do is they have to be intentional and specific on a mental goal, right? What mentally and from a mindset and approach am I trying to accomplish today? Physically, same thing. But now they get used to in their I am statements saying positive affirmations that feels really icky at first, right? Say, I am strong, I am beautiful, I am smart, I'm a great catcher, I am fast, right? I am worthy. And at first they're like, ugh, and you get this ick factor. And I tell them those that feel weird are the ones that you need to say over and over and over until you start believing it. Because until you believe it, nobody else will. So that's really kind of the daily work that we implement to build those habits.
Wow, that's amazing.
That's awesome. Your team recently competed at the USA Western Nationals and is now aiming for an Alliance National. How has that experience at the USA Western National kind of made their mindset with motivation going forward?
Yeah, so this team we're specifically talking about is our 10U team.
Okay.
These group of rock stars came up through our Futures program, and they are young and they are hungry and they love everything about being on the field together. So last year we really, grabbed another gear when it comes to just elevating our play and our competition, and then kind of expectations to say, all right, ladies, what you say you want to do this, let's go do it. So Western Nationals, we took a really young team up to Oregon, and we played some of the best talent at our age group. We took some thumpings, but they also really learned again how to grab another gear and compete, right? To stand in there against kids who were throwing what feels like 55 miles an hour from 35 feet away, right? Even to where they're getting my attention. I'm like, okay, what's happening here? But what's cool about that was their response to the hard, right? We came back and we had a couple kiddos that had to age up to 12s, but for the most part, we have the same team, the same core. And I asked them, I said, what's your end goal for this year? And they said, we want to go to nationals. And I said, okay, if you want to go to nationals, we know what it takes now to compete. Now we need to get to work and practice on the daily, because when we show up in the summer of 2025, we're going to be the one taking some names. And so they've just taken that motivation. And I think, I remember doing this, it feels like 100 years ago, but I coached a young 16 and under team right out of graduate school. And we went out to California. I mean, they all had big collegiate goals. And I said, all right, let's go play some kids who were going to go do that. And we went out there and we got our butts kicked. And they came back and they said, now I know what you're saying. And they locked in and they put in the work. And a lot of those kids went on to play Division I softball, which was really cool. So I love that we were able to put our kids in that environment. And I love even more their response. And so they took those lessons and they've applied it every day throughout the fall. And they're excited to get to work in our off-season training.
Oh, little babies. I love
They
that.
are. They're
That
awesome.
is so amazing. Well, with the 10U team, and I'm sure you see it as you have the older groups as well, you mentioned how strong of bonds that your teams do have within the organization. And I think that's really hard to achieve nowadays with travel ball. I think there's a lot of people that are from different areas and different states playing on different teams, and it's a lot of a big rotating thing going on. So how do you foster that camaraderie, and how do you think that impacts their growth as an athlete?
Well, I will tell you that one of the biggest things, and we preach this a lot in CSA, and I do personally, is be a good human and make good choices. I mean, throughout our leadership team, we've worked really hard to establish a culture within CSA of respect, of discipline, and that of just being a good human, right? And a lot of that it extends beyond the athlete to the families. First and foremost, and this, when younger in my career, this was hard to admit, but I'm not a fit for every family. I have expectations if you're in my organization on how you're going to treat people and how you're going to behave, right? So what's really cool with this group is they are so young, is we have incredible families. That these parents are doing the legwork at home. And we tell them, the first parent meeting of every season, this doesn't work if you're going home and you guys are talking, having table talk that's cutting down players or coaches.
Right.
This doesn't work, because inevitably that makes its way back onto my field through your kid's mouth or behavior. So we're not going to accomplish any goals if that's what's happening. And so I think that's what's really cool is we have a great group of families, I think, not only on this team, but throughout the organization that understand our culture expectation. So from there, I mean, we're able to have the kids' undivided attention on the field and establish that respect. And then we're able to deliver on that training aspect.
Yeah. Yeah, I think that's a really big part. Like parents are so important because like when you're recruiting out there and you hear a parent screaming at their kid,
Mhm.
like you don't want that kid on your college team because I mean that parent's just gonna bring that to the college field and it's you don't want
100%.
that. You definitely recruit the parents just as you just as much as
Yeah.
you
Well,
recruit the kid.
we get asked a lot from college coaches or older kids, what's the family like?
Yep.
Yeah.
And
Yep.
we have to be honest, one, because I mean, it's we're establishing credibility with coaches, but it's the right thing
Right.
to do. And if
Right.
mom's a
Exactly.
little cuckoo at times, then that has to be communicated, right?
Yeah.
So it starts at home.
Yep.
Yeah,
For sure.
absolutely it does.
Kind of going back to the foundation of your organization, what has been like the most difficult part of establishing and growing that organization?
Yeah, I would say changing a culture and creating a new one and setting expectations. I don't know if it's specific to our area, and I think a lot is just travel ball in general. There's a lot of team hopping that goes on. There hasn't been a huge focus on player development. And when we talk about player development, that is a process. And so you say trust the process. That's exactly what that means. It takes time to develop athletes, whether we're getting athletes that we have to break down bad habits, then to build new ones, or we need to get athletes through a season of sports performance development and skills development, right? So they can really start seeing that outcome. I think one of the challenges is people are so instant gratification that, hey, we're here. I didn't like how the first 2 weeks went, so guess what? We're going to go over to this team, and that happens a lot in the travel ball world. But I think um, now that we're in year 3, people have a really good idea and understanding about what trusting that process looks like. And when we say this is a 12-month development program, and we track metrics, right? We'll test these kids and we'll track their metrics because the biggest thing I want them to see, what are my numbers day 1? And then what are my numbers at that last month? And we should see dramatic increases in those, right? So I think that's been the hardest part, is just changing a culture and a mindset from what people are used to in the travel ball world.
Yeah.
Yeah.
That's so huge. So going off of that a little bit, you are in year 3. You're still,
Mhm.
growing and developing. You've done a great job with your foundation of this organization, and clearly you're going down an amazing path for sure.
Thank you.
What would you tell someone who may be watching this that's maybe in a different state, a different region, and they're like, I want to build something like that? What advice would you give them to build an organization that's so community based as
Mhm.
yours?
Your why has to be ironclad, right? It's got to be so strong. And then my second recommendation is surround yourself with strong, like-minded thinkers who raise their hand when you say, hey, hold my beer, I want to do something really cool, because that's the core. There's a lot of people that are going to come and go, but if you can have a core group, that leadership team, there's so much power and success. There's not one person that's going to be able to do this and be successful on their own. It just doesn't work that way. You need a team of like-minded thinkers that are in it for the right reasons and the same reasons.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Yeah, one of my coach in college, she said I hire people that are smarter than me. So and I think
Absolutely.
that's one of the coolest things. And just like going into like my life and going into my profession, like I'm always going to remember that. And so I
Mhm.
think that's one of the coolest things that she ever told me. So
Yeah, when leadership is working when you surround yourself with people who are smarter than you. It's true.
I love that. Yeah, that's awesome. Well, thank you, Ashlie. That is all we have for you today. I really appreciate you sitting down. I love learning about your organization, your mission. I think that you're doing some amazing things in softball, which we need right now more than ever. So thank you for all that you do, and we wish you the best of luck in the future with the fall season, the spring season. And if you ever have any ideas for us or anything we can do for you, please reach out to us.
Absolutely. I appreciate your time,
Yeah.
ladies, and the
yes,
opportunity to
thank
have
you.
this conversation.
Absolutely. Thank you. Have a great day.
You too.